So, hello and welcome to this, our second webinar from Woods Data, where you will be looking at the impact of COVID-19 on individual giving and looking at planning for the future. Thank you to everyone for joining. We've got attendees registered for over 150 attendees registered from over 60 UK charities. So we're really thrilled and thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're really fortunate to have join us some of the leading minds from UK fundraising. Today we've got Helen Dorr, who's Head of Data Strategy and Insights at Woodvale Data. We have Guy Upward, Assistant Director of Fundraising from the Royal British Legion. We've got Jane George, Director of Fundraising, Marketing and Media from the RNLI, and Dan Fusky, Head of Policy and External Affairs from the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. We've also got helping us out today, Emma Corbett, who a lot of you will probably know. She's helping us make sure everything runs smoothly in the background. Hopefully you won't need to see or hear her, sorry Emma, but if I do disappear today, Emma will be taking over as host. I'm Helen Hallahan, I'm Head of Marketing at Woodvale Data, and I'll be your host today. So we hope that the webinar will provide you some really useful insights as we look to the future in these unprecedented times. I'm just going to run through some housekeeping before we actually start. There's a chat function you might want to use, that's in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to make a comment to all attendees or start a discussion, please feel free to use it. At the end of the webinar, we're running a Q&A with the panelists. If you have a question to ask any one of the panelists, please pop that question in the Q&A function. That's a separate to the chat, the Q&A function. So including the name of the panelist you'd like to ask the question to, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session. However, if we get lots and lots of questions, the panelists have all kindly agreed to take those questions separately, provide answers, and I can email that to all the attendees together. So hopefully we'll be able to answer anything that you're particularly wanting to know. We'll also be running some polls throughout the session for you to vote on. So they'll come up on your screen. You simply click on the answer you want to give, and then we'll see across everybody that's registered and attending today what your thoughts are on a particular thing. We are recording the webinar and it will be available on demand after today. So we'll let you know by email when that's available, or follow us on LinkedIn and you'll be able to find the link on there afterwards if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. We're still really very new to webinars, or at least I am, so apologies if there are any hitches. We'll try and keep things as smooth as possible, but bear with us. So without any more ado, I'm really pleased to introduce our first panelist, Helen Dorr, Head of Data Strategy and Insights at Woodvale Data. Helen works closely with our charities and account directors. Her role is to support your fundraising activities, deliver actionable insights and data strategy recommendations alongside wider charity benchmarking and trend analysis. Helen brings with her her experience of working with the charity fundraising sector and working on data and CRM planning and insight projects. She's compiled the following report, which will also be available after the webinar to download from our website. So if you want to go to www.woodsvaledata.co.uk, you can download this report from there. And don't forget, if you've got any questions for Helen, send them through on the Q&A button and we'll answer them at the end. Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Helen. Hello, everyone. It's really exciting to be joining you for a second session where we're going to take a look at the impact of COVID-19 on individual giving. So here we are, part two. Our first report followed off the back of a call for information and help and understanding from our charity clients. When things kicked off back in March, a lot of questions came through. Were things still performing? Was regular giving dropping off a cliff? All of these sort of instant questions that people needed to know to help with their fundraising and to know what to do. This second part carries on very much in the same vein. The objectives are the same. We still have questions from our charity clients. We still want to know what's working, what's not working, particularly as things are changing in the world around us and we're testing new things and trying out different channels. You know, do the old ones still work? Is individual giving still okay? So I think as time goes on as well, those questions have slightly changed. They've become more deeper, and particularly over the last month, I think we're starting to see with the easing, you know, a slight concern around redundancies, the economic situation, that's starting to change now. What's the impact of that? And again, you know, people are out and about a bit more. They're back in the pub, they're back shopping. You know, do people still care? That initial height of awareness of charitable giving, you know, is that still going on, or are we starting to see a dip? So we're hoping this review will extend out past the phase that we saw in the first one, and to give you more information again as to how things are developing as we go along. So into the findings. The data is largely the same as last time, and it follows the same pattern. We've looked at key areas that we work with, cash asks and regular giving, individual giving. They are mostly warm data sets, so that we can compare like for like over time. So it covers off about, I think it's 62 different campaigns, 18 different charities, around 18 million income. So we've got a lot more diversity actually this time. We've got more emergency appeals that have been being run, so the data set is larger. Okay, cash campaigns. So last time it was a positive picture, and it still very much is. We are covering responses and average gifts and information up until the end of July now. So the phase that we're looking at is now Feb to July. The supporters are still highly responsive. So we are now seeing a 32% increase in response rates versus forecast across all of our cash campaigns, compared to a 25% increase that we saw in May. So if anything, things are looking stronger and better compared to them. If we look in a little bit more detail at the response rates for like warm cash campaigns last year versus this year, it was quite a stable picture when we looked at it back along. It was around about the same response rate. There was a hike up in average gift, but now we're seeing an even more marked improvement on our like-for-like warm cash campaign. So these things are not emergency appeals. They are your raffles, your normal cash appeals, prize draws, things that would normally be going out to your warm supporters. Compared to last year, you can see the response rates have gone from 7.7 up to 8.6%, which is a 12% uplift. As I said, when we looked at it in May, it was actually pretty static. So again, if anything, people are giving more. That average gift as well is still really, really strong, up from 21 to 25. Again, in May, that was actually pretty static. I think it just gone from 21 to 22. So again, we're seeing that those that are giving are actually giving more as well. We wanted to try and hone in a little bit more, now that we've got a wider data set and a bit more time, to have a look at types of charities. It's been quite widely reported in the charity press that certain types of charities are maybe not seeing quite the same responses as others, and our findings do support that. I think, as you can see here, the animal and the international charities are not seeing that uplift that other types of charities are. So the health and the human services are really seeing an uplift in response rate. I think probably, you know, in response to that human need and people responding to people in this time. Looking at the type of responses, this is a warm cash primarily, so online and credit card payments don't tend to be huge. So as you would expect, it's not a huge percentage. However, it is more than last year, so it does sort of follow the trend that we are seeing out there, where there's a very strong shift towards more digital responses and more digital campaigns. The interesting thing that we have spotted is that the average gift for online payments has increased by 45%. Numbers are still quite small in this area, so you know, a bit of caution taken there, but it does seem that those that are responding on the website are giving a much higher rate compared to last year. Looking more closely at our emergency cash appeals, so these are specific COVID-related emergency appeals. Last time when we looked at this in May, we were seeing an uplift of around 40% in response rate against forecast. This time, and we've got a lot more out there and that we are reviewing this time around, more cash appeals have gone out, and those that had gone out have come to fulfillment. So these numbers are a little bit more extended, a bit more robust, I would say now. Yeah, we're seeing a 61% uplift in response, so really, really strong against forecast, and a really strong average gift, as you can see there as well, way up over £30. So overall, on our cash, it definitely seems that, if anything, people are giving more. I was expecting maybe to see a bit of a dip, particularly over the last sort of month or two, as normality started to, or new normal, started to kick back in a little bit, as people had opportunities to go out and spend and be a little bit more distracted from what's going on around them in a COVID world. I thought there may be a slight dip. Particularly as well, you know, with donor fatigue, maybe, you know, there have been a lot of emergency appeals. Our normal cash campaigns are still going out. You know, are we asking too much, particularly when you take into account things like Captain Tom and, you know, big NHS revenue generating fundraising campaigns too? You know, have people had enough? Do they feel that they've given enough? Our results don't show that at all. It shows that it's still very much a giving world out there. Our supporters are still very much engaged with our charities and want to help, they want to give, not just to an emergency appeals, but also to normal campaigns as well, which is really, really reassuring to see. Might be partly, of course, because of the demographic of these types of people. They do tend to be older. You know, our older females are still very much involved in the response to these sorts of campaigns, and you know, they are tending to be more robust and I guess, yeah, more stable in these sorts of climates. They are less likely to be, you know, susceptible to redundancies and a changing kind of economic climate around them. So sort of as you would expect, people are still giving in this area, but it's really, really positive to see, and definitely something that you can take forward into the future planning. You know, this appears to be a safe base to be carrying on with. There's no reason that we can see to stop doing these sorts of campaigns. And emergency appeals as well. Over time, obviously we had a first flurry. Expect that is now dwindling down, but I think from what you can see here that there is definitely still scope, if you need to have a very specific targeted emergency appeal that I think would still probably respond very well. Moving on to look at our regular giving. We looked at it obviously at the end of April last time, and we could see that big spike in March up to sort of 14,000 cancellations. And in April, it started to drop back down. You can see on the right-hand side there that trend is carrying on and has done throughout May and June, but is now starting to go back up in July. Overall, time frame wise, looking at last year versus this year, our number of cancellations are down. Initially, I was like, oh, crikey, you know, that's great. Brilliant, people aren't cancelling, and I think that is true, that is great, but wanted to understand a little bit more about how that tied in with acquisition. Very conscious that face-to-face channels had stopped. Charity had to take a bit of a break really at that point of lockdown and think about how they were going to be doing regular giving, redirect funding into other channels. So was there a correlation between the two? And I think from here you can see that there is. In March, we had that spike, I think definitely a knee-jerk reaction to the changing world around them, fear, quite a few cancellations. However, that has then dropped down, and the acquisitions, likewise, with the taking out of face-to-face and a bit of time needed to redirect funds into other channels, you can see the acquisition has also dropped down. As acquisition has started to go back up towards the end of May, you can also see the cancellations following on behind as of July. So I think the direct debit cancellations are, you know, there is a correlation definitely with the acquisition rate, as you would expect really. The main message for that, which is a great one, is that the cancellations aren't, you know, they aren't falling down to really low levels. People aren't cancelling at a stupidly high rate. They are still maintaining their regular gift. And actually you can still acquire as well with acquisition starting again. We can see the numbers coming back up. Face-to-face is starting to get going again, and I know there's some good results coming through from those campaigns, and also where they're redirecting funds into other channels, digital, DRTV. Again, those channels are still responding well. So it definitely seems like regular giving apart from the sort of spike in March, is actually fairly robust and stable and kind of carrying on as normal. So to have a look at some summary and key actions, I think there's some key messages really to take through from this. One is that traditional cash campaigns and regular giving programs are still performing very well. There's nothing here to say that we should be stopping anything or really concerned about anything. I think our warm supporter bases are robust and still want to help and give, which is wonderful to see and very reassuring. So definitely something to take forward into our strategies and planning. That's a fairly safe thing to still carry on with, and we would definitely recommend that you do. I think the other thing to then bear in mind, which obviously we can't see so much within our data, is all of the new things that are happening. The world has changed out there. There's been some channels that have been cut off for a while, retail, face-to-face, big mass events, and a shift off the back of that into other channels. So virtual fundraising across events and individuals has been massive, along with a real progression in social marketing and digital and in kind of use of more DRTV as well with cheaper media. So things have changed around us, and I think that's going to continue. And so the other key message really that I've been thinking about is around knowing our supporters and integrating our campaigns around that. As we are using different channels and going into different things at the moment, we're probably starting to recruit into our bases slightly different types of people. We were already going that way in the charity landscape. We knew we would have to start to shift our demographics and our bases as younger generations are coming through. But I think this has been catalysed by COVID-19, and we've really leapt forward in the use of virtual and online. So as we move forward into our planning for the future, we'll need to really think about that. What do the people that have been recruited on those channels look like, and how do they differ from our traditional audiences? And making sure that we are tailoring our campaigns and our messages and our content to attract and maintain and keep going with both of these types of people, so that we're talking to the right people in the right way and engaging them, and basically making the most out of this heightened awareness of charities and giving. We don't want to lose that. We want to keep our new people with us, as well as retaining our traditional audiences. Okay, that is me done. I'm going to hand back to you, Helen.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. Really appreciate that. Some really interesting insights coming out there. It's really positive about the cash campaigns that we're seeing come through Woodsvale data and the results that are coming through there, and also the regular giving cancellation patterns. Very interesting as well. So thank you for presenting that. Again, if anybody wants to download that report in full, that's available on the Woodsvale data website, www.woodsvaledata.co.uk. I think we're going to go straight in now to hear from Guy Upward, who is the Assistant Director of Fundraising at the Royal British Legion. Guy's worked with marketing and fundraising for a number of years, firstly for direct marketing agencies, and then he moved to the charity sector some 16 years ago. After stints at Oxfam and Livability, Guy joined the Royal British Legion and now heads up the individual giving team. He heads up a team of 35 fundraisers at the Legion, comprising of legacies, supporter acquisition and supporter development, and is responsible for gross income of around 45 million. Don't forget, if you've got any questions for Guy, pop them through in the Q&A, and we'll look to answer those at the end of the session. So without further ado, over to you, Guy. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. I've just got half a dozen slides I was going to share with you. So let me just get this up now. I think that's all good. Right. I wrote this a few days ago and then reread it again last night, and I read the title, Planning for the Future in the World of COVID-19. I think, as the government has found out over the past few days, it's a very, very hard thing to do, planning in the current environment. But as fundraisers, we are doing so, and we will continue to do so, but it is very, very difficult. I just want to share with you some of our learnings at the Legion, just following on from Helen's presentation just now, And I mean, everything that Helen Dorr has just been through with you, we have been mirroring within the Legion. So, funnily enough, this direct marketing stuff really does work. It continues to work. It has worked, and in my belief, it will continue to work. On our COVID-19 appeal, which we sent out in May, that performed very, very well for us. Prior to that, we had a VE Day campaign, a campaign to commemorate victory in Europe. That landed in very early April. Again, that did very well for us too. Our free wills, we are continuing to promote. The take-up of those is still very, very good. I think maybe people just realise their own mortality and want to take steps to protect both themselves and their loved ones, and there's never a better time to sort out a will for yourselves. Direct debits, again, our income has very much mirrored that which Helen Dorr has been through. We had some blips in April, but then following that, our levels of attrition have reverted back to normal levels. So that's really, really good. Our legacy income has been a bit lumpy. Again, it's very much stop-start with legacies. I think solicitors had a bit of a shock having to work from home, so maybe their ways of working were somewhat different. But they since kind of turned that around, and the flow of legacies has now picked up again. I'm now told the housing market is looking really, really good. So properties are now selling, and that is pushing through legacies or legacy income there. So that's really good. But again, all of this is really underpinned by our very, very strong supporter base. As Helen mentioned just now, a lot of charities donors are older, and our base is no different to that. So these people aren't affected by losing their jobs. Many of them have income that they can rely on, albeit not massive, but they can still afford to give cash gifts and regular gifts to the charities they support. So we are just really, really lucky in having a really strong supporter base that continues to support us. We're now in the middle of our planning for September to December, which is our busiest period during the year. And we'll have direct response TV continuing on the TV channels. Our usual direct mail appeals, well, not usual, but our direct mail appeals will continue. We are looking to get back into private sites and starting that activity fairly soon. Also, some of the events we run remembrance events. They will still be happening, but at the moment we've taken the decisions that they will be private events, so we're effectively not inviting members of the public to them, but we will still run those events, video them, stick it on our website, and do good by our supporters in planting. We have remembrance crosses that we plant, so we'll continue to do that and do good by our supporters for this year. We also run the Poppy Appeal, as this is the sort of £50 million every year. There are some significant challenges with Poppy Appeal. That 50 million, I reckon about 40 million pounds of that is in pound coins or less. So there's a lot of coinage there. Elderly volunteers run the campaign for us. Distribution is always an issue. And at the moment, people aren't on the streets shopping. People aren't in railway stations. There'll be face-to-face issues of just making sure our volunteers are protected with PPE, etc. We've still got the issue about local lockdowns in places like Leicester and Manchester. And cash, really, the use of cash has really dropped significantly, as I'm sure you all know. And again, that appeal is very much reliant on cash. So again, we're looking at some initiatives this year, looking at some digital initiatives. We are looking at additional distribution routes that we can undertake to distribute our poppies. We're looking at virtual events. We're looking at how we can actually make our supporters safe, as I said. and rolling out contactless methods of donating as well. So again, really reviewing the whole way that we approach this appeal. The future, one word is probably precarious. It is a very, very difficult situation. I firmly believe that individual giving will be holding its own. We will be continuing to generate some really good income from our individual giving activity, as long as we ensure that it's relevant, pertinent, timely, and relevant to our target audience. But there are some areas in my organisation, such as events and special events. Our corporate giving is very challenging at the moment, and also, as I mentioned just now, the Poppy Appeal will be a very large challenge for us this year. But yeah, it will be challenging, precarious, but yeah, we'll have to look back at it in December and have a review of what the further future will be looking like in 2021. That's me. Shall I hand back over to you, Helen?
Thanks, Guy. That's fantastic. It'd be great to hear and see what December looks like, actually, from where we are now in the middle of the year to where we will be at the end of the year. I think some really interesting things you said there about, well, difficult for the Poppy Appeal, but about the innovation that you're going through at the moment as a charity and the ways that you're finding new ways to enable that appeal to happen through the PPE with the volunteers, but also contactless payments, etc. So it'd be really interesting to find out how that works out. Thank you so much for your time to share that story with us and the way that the Royal British Legion is going forwards with their fundraising at the moment. I'm going to interject slightly with the presentations with a quick poll for our attendees. So there's going to be a poll coming up on your screen, and we're really interested to find out from everybody what individual giving activity has yielded the most income since February 2020. We appreciate that lots of channels have been restricted as part of this, but if you could just take a minute just to vote on the one activity out of these. We've got direct mail, DRTV, email, face-to-face, individual supporter initiatives, and in that we're thinking like Captain Tom, social media, telemarketing, people going direct to your website, or anything else that other initiatives or channels that you might have been using. So we'll just give you a minute or two to, or a few seconds to complete your thoughts on that. Okay, so direct mail, DRTV, email, face-to-face, individual supporter initiatives, social media, telemarketing, or direct to website, or something else. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now and share those results with you. So, as you can see here, and I think probably quite expectedly, 71% of the people that responded said that direct mail has yielded the most income since February 2020. And the next largest is social media, which is really interesting. So 8% of those responding to this poll said social media. Others coming in there, we've got DRTV at 4%, email at 4%, individual supporter initiatives at 4%, telemarketing 4%, and direct to website at 4%. So direct mail is clearly the channel that is yielding the most income, with social media coming up next. So thank you very much for completing that poll. We'll go forward now and hear from Jane George. Jane is Director of Fundraising and Marketing, Fundraising, Marketing and Media, apologies, at the RNLI. She is an experienced and successful charity leader in the UK and has held senior positions at Save the Children and the Children's Society. She was also Director of Fundraising and Communications at the Guide Dogs and is now Director of Fundraising, Marketing and Media at the RNLI. She's an active and passionate volunteer and campaigner. She's a Chair of Trustees for the Murray Parish Trust, which is a successful small charity that's just closed a £2 million appeal to build a new paediatric intensive care unit, which is fantastic, at the Southampton Hospital, as well as a trustee for Make-A-Wish, which is a charity which was formed to grant life-changing wishes to children with critical illnesses in the UK. She supports causes close to her heart and has completed several challenges to raise money and inspire others to do the same. If you have any questions for Jane, please put them through on the Q&A button at the bottom of your panel. So hi Jane, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, can you see my screen, Helen? Hello.
Sorry, yeah, sorry Jane, I put myself on mute already. I can't see your screen at the moment.
Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you. There's the share screen button at the bottom.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Just trying again, hang on a sec. It was showing on mine, so. Try again, sorry, bear with me. How's that?
Yes, we can see that now, definitely.
Okay, just put that into full screen mode.
Brilliant.
Hello,
Thanks,
good
Jane.
morning everyone. Thank you for your time, for listening in. I'm just going to take a slightly different view of COVID-19 and talk a bit about how my organisation, the RNLI, have approached this from our kind of comms and messaging perspective. And just to put it in context, I can absolutely support all of the stats that you've seen from the other presenters this morning in terms of basically propensity to give of our donors, and all of our appeals have been not just successful but remarkably successful this year, and as a result of that we've actually just launched a massive door drop campaign targeting about 8 million households in August, basically to try and recoup some of the losses from things like, you know, our lifeboat station open days that will be happening generally through the end of July and August. It's a massive time for our community activity. Having said that, at the weekend, Filey Lifeboat Station up on the northeast coast had its virtual open day, open weekend this weekend, and actually doubled what they would normally make by offering virtual 3D tours of the lifeboat station, of the boat, of the crew rooms, and etc. So I think the innovation that our stations, our volunteers have shown has been remarkable and has got us through. Anyway, so back to weathering the storm, which for us obviously kind of I came back to the RNLI early 2019 and to a situation where fundraising was kind of dispersed throughout the organisation, and we've had to rebuild the team. We focused very much on doing that, on producing a high impact campaign for Christmas last year, which was Perfect Storm. So when we started this, we were coming out of what we thought was a perfect storm only into one that was even bigger, and we'd already set our sights on launching a Christmas campaign for this year around our new vision as an organisation about saving everyone. And the way that we did that, our creative services team worked very much on looking at our specific support and needs in terms of what does that mean in terms of self-determination theory. So a little bit of science there, which is quite helpful in as much as it helps non-fundraisers understand more about why we do what we do, and clearly helps us relate more closely to the needs of people in a crisis. So we based out all of our messaging around that. In terms of where we took our sort of inspiration for this messaging from was very much from what we've called our watch document, which is that piece of text you can see on the right hand side there, and we developed that to kind of front up a new 5-year strategy. We got a new CEO mid last year who has a very clear idea about the RNLI, and particularly the importance of our volunteers and our people more generally, and so came up with the Our Watch statement through our internal creative teams. We were really, the COVID situation gave us an opportunity to really test that messaging in terms of what bits of it we could draw on to maintain consistency whilst responding to you know, the things that people were worried about in their own lives, but also kind of pull together our messaging from an internal point of view, so that we were working from one document, whether we're talking to, you know, our people, our staff, our volunteers, or our supporters, and very much putting on different sections of that as we work through this. So we just basically then tried to kind of work out a routine, a comms plan that will get us through what I think we were expecting at the time to be a relatively short-term lockdown, and since then obviously it's become clear that it's going to be for a longer period of time. But we were very much focused on basically from the early parts of this, why we were looking out for our supporters as much as they were looking out for us in terms of supporting us. So we did a really warm emails in terms of you know, we want you to know that we're thinking about you, and we drew on the experiences of our crews in terms of them saying things like, you know, when we go out on a shout, we don't know when the next time we'll see our loved ones is going to be, and we know that that's now what you're experiencing, but you guess what, we're looking out for you because you're one crew with us. And that got some quite extraordinary responses in terms of when we started using that messaging on our emails and on social media, in terms of the feedback we got from our supporters. One woman writing, every other email I received was full of what we're doing to manage in this crisis. And when I received the RNLI email, it was in a very torrid time for me, and actually it was nice just to hear someone say, we understand what you're going through. And so then we did this sort of language, which is, you know, that sort of putting yourself in their shoes. So wherever you are, you're probably feeling uncertain about the future too. That's why we wanted to get in touch and send our support to you, because you're part of our crew, and crew members look out for each other. So that was some of the language examples from that stage. Dave Riley, one of our volunteer crew at Paul, is also in our press team, has become a bit of a kind of social media guru over the course of this, having moved from our ops team into the fundraising team, and it's been quite handy having someone on site that we can get kitted up at short notice and respond to things. So that's worked extremely well. And then just there's some more examples, again just featuring on Dave, because he'd been in the social media campaign to keep consistency of messaging all the way through that. And we looked at basically 12 fortnightly emails to get us through to the beginning of the summer, and how we would build up those things and introduce content that was very much related to what people were experiencing. So, you know, our RNLI jigsaw puzzles did really well on the back of these email campaigns as well. And then moving on to kind of reminding supporters that they are the power behind our organisation, and that reminding them that while they might be feeling vulnerable and powerless in their lives, there's actually a way that they are contributing to this, because of course our crews stayed on station 24/7, ready to go out, and so we wanted to remind our supporters that's what they were constantly providing, and so we started introducing messaging about them being lifesavers too, and we started doing more proactive fundraising at that time. So at a time we're unable to see our families, can make us feel powerless, but your kindness is powering us right now. Moving on to autonomy, and this was really when we started to draw on, this is our watch and how we're all in this together, and we know from research that we've done that when our volunteers, our supporters talk about themselves, they talk about themselves with pride when they talk about themselves as an RNLI donor. So we started to introduce that language in a more forthright way in comms through this. And obviously this was in the run-up to May Day, which again traditionally would have been a very, very community-led activity, and we moved it all online for this year. So to make them feel part of the whole RNLI, so things haven't changed. Selfless lifesavers who make it happen, people like our volunteers who have always been ready to answer the call, and people like you who have always stood by their side. So again, just really reinforcing our core values, mission, and keeping it consistent with our watch document. So then we started moving on to, what else do they need? And it's the growth, acceptance, and purpose. And in growth, it was really kind of volunteering to face the storm together that we picked up here. And it was at the same time that we did we launched our second Launch a Memory campaign, which is an in-mem offering that in exchange for a donation, supporters can name a loved one that will go on the decal of the letters on the side of a lifeboat. So really enforcing that by launching memory, they and their families are standing by our sides and becoming lifesavers themselves. And obviously with a name on the boat they're launching every time that boat goes to sea. So even at a time of isolation when we miss our loved ones the most, we are still standing side by side, ready to face the worst together. So that really reinforcing the that line from our watch that we're all in this, and it's affecting us all in the same way. And then the self-acceptance, and we really focused on with courage nothing is impossible, which was a quotation that we use a lot at the RNLI. It was said by our founder, Sir William Hillary, when he launched the organisation nearly 200 years ago. So we wanted to really pull out the courage element of this, so that we could by again drawing attention to the courage that our crews display every time they launch a lifeboat or go into the sea to rescue someone from a beach, that we wanted people to feel part of that, and we wanted to obviously underline our summer appeal fundraising, which actually doubled its target. So so really using that kind of courage messages kind of helped us talk about our past as well as what's going on right now, and helped us to talk about the summer storm that we're facing. The wave that we didn't expect was kind of quite common language through this time. Again, it was really just focusing very, very much on the kind of 24/7 nature of the RNLI's work. So hour after hour will be called, and this is going to be busy because by this stage we realised that foreign holidays weren't going to be a thing, and it was still warm weather, so more and more people will be flocking to our beaches. So kind of that feeling of that relentlessness, but it's you that helps us get through this. And then through August, we've started to focus on Save Everyone, and actually this is kind of hot off the press. It's not even part of this presentation yet, but we've actually shifted to Save Everyone to the right and we'll probably launch that Christmas 21. And the reason we're doing that is that essentially what's come through for us in terms of the research we've done with our donors and supporters is that family is really important this time. So we're just using this Christmas to talk about the absence of family members, and obviously we can tell stories about Christmas Day rescues, etc. So kind of rounding off the COVID year with slightly different content from what we would normally use at a Christmas campaign. So so from that point of view, we're talking about the wave that we never expected hitting us this year, absent friends, you know, for anyone that's been lost at sea this year, and also for the crew member that gets called away from his Christmas or her Christmas lunch. But just to talk a bit about Save Everyone, which I say we will be moving on, it was very, very crew focused. We really wanted the crew to own our messaging, and it won't surprise you, I don't think, to hear that our crew, our volunteers don't like to be termed heroes. They like to be thought of, but this is just our job, it's what we're trained to do. We get the best kit and we get the best training, and we're able to do this. And we wanted to do something they would be happy to share on their social media. And when we started to explore this territory around, you know, we don't go out to save one person from the crew of 2, we go out to save everyone, but it's always the recovery rather than the rescue that haunts their memories. So we're kind of building some creative territory around that for next year. You don't need to see that. There we are. I hope I'm on time, Helen. Just realising it's a kind of very, very quick run through of our creative story this year.
It's really interesting, Jane. Thank you so much. And I think that what statement document that you ran through, and you could see how all the messaging was pulled out across the period, tie everything together, and how valuable that statement is. And hopefully the people who are attending this webinar can see the value of that kind of statement and maybe adopt it for their charities as well. And thank you so very much for taking the time to share that with us. We were going to do another poll, but I think with the timing that we've got, we'll move on to hear from Dan Flusky. Dan is Head of Policy and External Affairs at the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. He leads the Institute's policy development and research work, keeping up to date with member priorities, promoting innovation on fundraising, and working with key stakeholders, including civil servants and politicians, to make sure fundraising and giving are key priorities for the current and future governments. If you've got any questions for Dan, please do share them on the Q&A section. And Dan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you, Helen, and really glad to be able to join you all today. And I guess kind of just wanted to say to begin with, thank you to Helen and all of your colleagues for actually putting both this session together, but doing the work on pulling the research and the insight together. I think it's at a time where everybody is looking around going, what the hell is going on? And, you know, not just looking at their own charity, but trying to get a sense of what's happening across the sector. Having that kind of research and insight is hugely, hugely valuable. So thank you for that. And I'm sure people will be eagerly downloading and reading through the report. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, really, I think, so that we can get to some of your questions. I guess kind of putting what we're seeing and what we're hearing today in a bit of a wider context, I guess. So we've been looking across, you know, what's happening with levels of giving, what's happening in terms of the impact of coronavirus on charities across the sector. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that, and also some thoughts maybe around what's lying ahead, given that we are now officially in a recession, although we all knew it was coming, and what does that mean in terms of levels of giving. I think some of the stuff that's in the report around the response both to emergency appeals and to general kind of cash gifts and the uplift of average values is positive. And you know, a lot of the time what we're looking at and what we're seeing is relatively negative stories and negative kind of issues in terms of the impact on charities. So actually seeing in real terms the fact that people are responding to those campaigns and that the gift levels are going well and that there's positive responses kind of on year and uplift percentages on those campaigns is a really useful thing to see. I think it helps to balance out a little bit some of the doom and gloom, which is very real but is very prevalent as well. So I think that's really important. And I think my sense is during recessions and during real times of hardship and challenge such as what we're in now, people don't become suddenly much less generous. People don't suddenly completely stop giving, but we can't ever take it for granted that they will continue to give. And we have to be mindful and responsive to what's happening out there, to the fact that job numbers are going up, job losses are going up, the fact that household income is going to dip, and be able to respond to our donors appropriately in that way. And I think that's why some of the emergency appeals have done so well, is because they feel resonant, they feel real, they feel like charities are understanding what's in the mind of the public and what's in the mind of donors and talking to them directly. And I think we need to carry that through as much as we can in the months ahead. I think it's going to be tricky because we are probably now in what is the second phase of fundraising in 2020, which is not just how do we fundraise through a health pandemic and an emergency, but how are we going to fundraise through an economic downturn and a severe recession. And the two things do bring different challenges and different questions and different approaches that we need to think about. I thought it'd be useful to kind of take a little bit of a look around what happened during the last recession, so following the financial crash. And not that history will inevitably repeat itself by any means. And obviously the situation now is very different in terms of the sharpness of the recession and the reasons for it. So we need to not just apply it across automatically, but we need to take a little bit of a look about what happens when the economy goes down. And what we saw is that from 2007 to 2009, individual giving did fall. So it fell in real terms from 10.6 billion to 9.9 billion. And it works out at around 11% in terms of the total value of donations. And that was a mix of both a lower mean average value of donations given. So it went down from £33 to 31. A lower median average value of donations, and a slightly smaller percentage of people giving to charity, of 56% down to 54%. Now, obviously, you know, we don't want to see fewer people giving, but I think we do need to be mindful of the fact that these, you know, the wider trends will have an impact on people's livelihoods, on their jobs, on the amount of money and the decisions that they take. But actually what's been really interesting is that over the last years, since the recession, up until last year almost, is that donation values did go up each year, and that actually the level of donations and the average growth in donations has exceeded the average growth in the economy. So the economy's grown by 3.6% and value of donations has grown by 4.4%. And that is mainly driven through the people that are closest to us, the donors that are most loyal, continuing to give and tending to give a little bit more. And I think that reflects, Helen, some of the findings in the report around the average value of gifts that we have seen as well. So I think, again, you know, it is likely that there will be an impact on giving, but actually, if we can keep those relationships with those who are warmest to us, who are closest to us, who are most likely to give and who are more likely to give higher amounts, then actually the impacts that we will see, hopefully, can be mitigated. And I think both from Jane's presentation around seeing those campaigns and seeing the resonance that are built into those campaigns, thinking about what Guy said about don't forget what works. I've written that down on my pad here in terms of we are in unprecedented times, but we also have a huge amount of insight and information about how fundraising works, how donors respond, and we should have reassurance and some confidence in what we have seen and in the skills, the behaviours, the values that have driven our fundraising to successful levels over the recent years, because it is those same fundamentals that are going to see us through in the best possible position that we can get through in the coming years ahead as well. I think the biggest issue in terms of the future is less about the economy and less about people becoming less generous. I think it's about social distancing and the opportunities to fundraise as we did previously. So the opportunities of community fundraising, events fundraising, mass participation, all of those kind of things. It's that is stopping giving at the moment, rather than people suddenly deciding they don't want to be charitable. And I think understanding over the next few months how fundraising can return safely and responsibly in the right way is going to be the biggest thing that's going to determine how successful we can be over the next few months and the coming years as well. Last thing I think I'd say is, we are seeing challenges out there. We are seeing, both in the sector and in the wider economy, challenges and difficulties, but the future isn't set in stone. The future isn't inevitable in terms of saying, well, there's a 20% reduction in GDP, therefore we're going to have to revise down donations by 20%. We still have a lot of agency, a lot of control and a lot of discretion, and the ability to shape the future, not just to be kind of bystanders of what happens. And thinking about how we can, use the insight, use some of the thinking that Jane and Guy have outlined to understand how we can best keep those supporters loyal by thinking about the satisfaction, the commitment, the trust levels that are absolutely inherent in all of the relationship fundraising, I think is going to be the number one thing to help see us through as best we can. I think I shall stop there. I didn't have a presentation and slides, but hopefully that's been useful. And I think, Helen, you're going to come to some questions and feedback.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Dan. That was really, really helpful. I think it's pulled everything together, and it's really good to hear from your own research that you've been doing as well, about the growth of donations exceeding the growth in the economy, and actually some really positive things to take away from that. But to remember the other things that have come out of today as well, in terms of resonance, making sure that things are relevant, identifying who those loyal donors are, because they're the ones that are really going to help carry us through. You're absolutely right. There have been some questions, some of which have been answered directly in the chat, which is fantastic. There was a brief one for Jane that came through. So Jane, somebody was very interested to know, in terms of door drop campaign that you're running at the moment, whether you know what the split is between warm and cold in terms of the people that you're communicating with on that campaign.
So we literally just went live with that on, I think it was Thursday or Friday last week, so we haven't got really any kind of sufficient responses yet. We've been encouraged in terms of the number of phone calls we've taken that it's going to outperform our last door drop, which was as part of our Perfect Storm appeal at Christmas. In that appeal, we got about, and I'm speaking from memory, so if there's anyone from the team on live, please forgive me if this isn't quite right, but I think we got about 20% of our responses came from people that were already known to us, and also a significant number of anonymous as well, which we don't know about. But obviously, because it's a door drop, it is aimed at acquisition primarily.
Thank
but we've had a really pleasing, the first few days given us a really pleasing both response rate and average gift. So we're very, very confident about that will perform well for us.
Thank you very much. Guy, the question for you here. You talked about cashless tech and kind of moving into cashless technology for your Poppy appeal that's happening. What cashless tech are you choosing to use?
We're looking at a number of ways, really. One is just pushing people onto our website and then getting them to self-select as to how they want to support. And then obviously there's an online donation form there. We're looking into QR codes, where you click on a code and that takes you to a donation site, and then you can make a hopefully easy donation there and then to the Legion, and that's to kind of capture people who are outside Sainsbury's or out and about. So it's kind of an immediate method of donation. And also we have our usual texting methods as well, so we're looking at that too. So they're the kind of three main ways we're looking at cashless technology.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that answer. Helen, a question for you in terms of the emergency appeals. Did you see the same split between international and non-international as the cash appeals on emergency appeals?
Yes, so the diversity across different charity types for the emergency appeals wasn't quite statistically valid enough to include. We had a lot more of a focus on non-international charities within the emergency appeals that we had data for. So it wasn't, we didn't have enough of the kind of international type charities to be able to include it. However, as a top line view, yes, it was the same picture. The non-international performed much better than the international.
Brilliant, thanks Helen. And thank you everyone for your time today. Really, really appreciate the time that you've taken to tell your stories and share your thoughts with us about these current situations. It's very challenging for everyone. I hope that everybody that's attended the session today has taken some valuable insight from it. Let's keep going. The stories that are coming out are really positive around individual giving, and hopefully, Guy, as you say, when we get to December and look back to see what's happened, we'll be able to look back and see a positive picture as well. So thank you all. If you do have any further questions, please do feel free to email me, helen.hallahan@woodsvaledata.co.uk, and I'll try and share that with the panelists and get back to everybody on that. But have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you very much.